if when you talk to your counselor and they don't fix it and figure it out, I'm gonna call the principal because it's just ridiculous how because it went from an A to an F overnight.
Did you not turn in an assignment?
No, I turned everything in.
No.
I did. I turned everything in. I know I'm right. Where are you going? It's right across the wall. Go. Get out. Go. Yeah. I don't know how to transition from children's stories to history. It's a very good question of that. It's not cool. Either that or I just have a really quick snap it. Because I'm not it because it's 11. 11 is usually not good for cold weather. Right? What's some challenges? How do you want to go there? It's usually crowded, so he'll know that you're there if the stuff is here. Because everyone goes to the bathroom. I'm so recommending you down. No. Not my school. It's not science. It's this. It's in legal science. You're making people reading because that's what they need to protect. What about dinosaurs before the next season? Have you read it? What is this?
That sounds fun. You guys are really into talking about that. Cool.
I'm trying to learn to like things, but he doesn't like anything. He doesn't pretend. Yes. I don't know about him. It's it's an easy side. For kids. I love the travel. Alright,
That's a bad neutral. Good.
Yeah, that one.
It's all right. IU blew a game last night. Purdue blew a game. And it was a bad day for basically a bad day for Indiana basketball. Period.
Lauren, we were acting Michigan, and Lauren was like, "What's Purdue playing?" Coach was like, "Well, Purdue plays a lot of sports."
That's funny.
I've seen that.
She always sends me this message, and I always don't respond. Sorry. Like,
That's because you have
I mean, it's like cold call sales.
Yeah.
I know all of a sudden changed the title of the email, or the address, the name of the top. All right, good people. We're gonna wrap it up today for about 47 minutes, maybe about less, 44, and then we're gonna chill. So I'm calling that. Yep. Look at all these Zoomers. You guys see the Zoomers? Get those cameras on. Let's participate today. Yeah. Wait, what is that? Hiddle back in here? What was that? Oh, no. I thought it was crazy. All right. We got Charlie. All right. Good people. Welcome. We got a good game plan for today. All right. We got some interesting stuff to look at. Tony's going to finish up that text. Tony the Tiger. And then we are going to talk about homework tomorrow, and then we'll be done. So what I would like to do, I'll probably need to record this one because last one got a little goofy at times. I'm going to share my screen when I figure out what I want to share. We got people coming in. Oh, are you gonna? You don't have to do 10. It's all good. Yeah. Figure it out. / take a good guess. No, you want me to? Oh, you're in. It's in. Okay, I'm gonna put something on the board. It's a question, Zoomers. Okay. What I want you to do with this question is in the chat box, I want you to record publicly so you can make it so it's open to everybody. Why did depression in the United States cause a worldwide depression? So we did not really get to cover this completely, but we got to the end of it yesterday. So those of you on Zoom, put it in the chat box, please. And then in person, do you mind writing today? Do you mind doing the recording right above your head? It's all good. Wasn't good anyways. I think I'm not gonna throw under the bus who it was, but if you want to move your desk a little bit too, or you can scoot back. I don't really care where you go. As long as you don't have COVID, the school gets mad about people being close to each other. Then you know what I mean. Okay, in the chat box, in class, or on Zoom, put in the chat box an answer to the question on the screen. Assuming I'm sharing it. Am I sharing it? Good. All right. Gabriel, can you see the question? Okay. All of you over here. Let's run our answer on the board. Let's see what we already have. See if there's anything you can add. You would add to that. Go ahead. You want to read that out loud? Or you want me to? All right. Here's what we got. The whole world was tied to the U.S. economy. This after the depression, and then it caused massive unemployment in the United States. This ended up causing inflation and banks to go down. Global production went down. Anytime global production goes down, that means less goods, means less money. Right, Nikai? Okay, pay attention. All right, less food is being produced. Spent a lot of money, overspent in the 1920s. Food prices declined, wheat prices. Is there anything you would add to that, Tony? Good. We're gonna put that up there. The countries stopped trading with each other. Those of you on Zoom, if you could put this as not a private message or direct message so that other students get to enjoy your knowledge. Anything else, Tony? You get about 60 seconds. All right. Zooms and in classers. Here we go. Set up markets with different nations and grew codependent. Domino effect. Good answer. Other countries had to lower the price of their exports. Yes. When the U.S. came calling for payments, there was nothing there. World economy, currency. Huh. A lot of countries owed money. So we got that point down pretty good in the messages here on Zoom. Now I see there's 16 people on Zoom and I got about 7 people that responded. That's because we didn't get to it in the end of class yesterday. So basically what I want you to understand is because of the United States taking the lead in the world in terms of banking and in industry after World War I, we were setting up the rest of the world to also fall at the same time. I mean, sometimes we're an extremely connected global economy now. I mean, just look at how the COVID response has been, how it has affected the world. I mean, if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, you could think about like how China's going to come out ahead of the United States on this, due to the way that our different countries have reacted to COVID-19. You know, think about that. I don't think their people are getting $2,000 paychecks or $1,200 stimulus funds. You know, they're probably getting $12 if that. Probably not even that. Depends on how rich you are and if you're in the Communist Party there. So yeah, life is different elsewhere. All right. Today we're going to focus on the Russian Revolution. Okay, and we're going to go through the causes of the war, or causes of the revolution. Some of this you already know, so I'll tell you what I would write down. I'll tell you some stuff I wouldn't write down, and then I get into some drama with a guy by the name of Rasputin, which you get to just kind of listen, and you probably have heard of Rasputin before, but we'll look at some pictures, and then we'll go from there. Okay. All right. So this is kind of a review, but just something you need to take into account here. Okay. Russia used foreign investment to build their factories, and most of them were located in the European part of Russia. All right. So why is it bad to use foreign investment to make your factories and industry? Kai, you want to take a guess? Why is it bad to use foreign investment to build your industry? You owe them money. Bingo. Poor working conditions led to urban unrest. What kind of poor working conditions am I referring to? The serfs. Okay. Also on top of that, if you remember right, they had redemption payments. The serfs had to deal with working in industry and then also making sure that their land was farmed as well. So it was pretty tough. On top of that, the Russo-Japanese War, Russia, if you remember right, was embarrassed by Japan in 1904, 1905, and a naval battle over China, really. And then remember the revolution of 1905. So I'm going to have somebody on Zoom is going to unmute and just kind of talk to us a little bit about the revolution of 1905 in Russia. Do you remember why it happened? Remember why people were protesting? Anybody?
There are horrible workers' rights.
Okay, workers' rights, certainly one. Anything else that we might remember? In class, anybody? Nothing? You guys remember not just bad workers' rights, but also a lack of bread? And so that's why you had people protesting, no political representation, censorship. And so the people wanted to say. So there was creation of the Duma. It only lasted 2 years. We've already talked about this here recently, okay? The time period's going to bleed over. All right. So this is also a little bit of a review until we get to the bottom, really. And so a lot of revolutionaries ideas floating around. Remember, communism, socialism had only been around for about 50 years and had never really gained traction in Western Europe because Western Europe was terrified of socialism and communism. Well, it found a nice breeding ground in Eastern Europe because of the dissatisfaction with the rich. And what does it take to have a communist revolution? Well, remember, we got to go back to Karl Marx's 10 points. Did we talk about this? I think I had you read it. I hope I did. If I didn't, it was a bad school year. But remember, in the 10 points, it's the abolition of basically all private property and all things that are owned by anybody individually, and it all goes to the state, which is wildly revolutionary and has never happened in history. And so Russia was a nice breeding ground because it had serfs that didn't like the Tsar and the nobles, called the boyars, and it also had industrial workers that didn't like the government either. So it's kind of the perfect mix. Has anybody ever seen the symbol for communism? It's a sickle and a what? I think we went over it. Sickle and a what? And a hammer. The sickle and a hammer. The sickle represents cutting down wheat. The hammer represents industry. Okay? What are you doing, dude? Oh, interesting. You need to go somewhere? Take a medicine or anything? Okay. All right. So, yeah, don't worry about it, folks, on Zoom. Now, that means that the workers in the farms and in the industry are going to come together to unite to overthrow the upper class. Okay. So the Bolshevik Party is created in 1903 by a disgruntled intellectual, someone who had been university trained, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, also known as Lenin. And he's going to end up being kicked out of Russia after the revolution of 1905. And that's where he's going to do most of his work. Okay. What does Bolshevik stand for? Anyone remember? The weird thing is Bolshevik stands for the minority party. Menshevik was the majority party, and the Bolsheviks ended up winning out, even though they were much smaller. They had good tactics. Okay, we'll get into that here shortly. Here's Lenin. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? His eyebrows, he's got a little furrowed up on the top there. He had not accepted his baldness yet. In the year 2021, he might have shaved that off. Just gone with the goatee. Mr. Renshaw style, you know? Yes. Other than that, I mean, obviously dressed like a Western elite as well. So a little bit different than the Young Turks. Now, fast forward to stuff that we haven't talked about. Russia, we know, fought badly in the war, but we haven't really talked about the fact that they lost 4 million men in the first year of the war when they were consistently winning battles in the first 2 months, if you remember right, against Germany. 4 million people. And the Tsar's uncle was the commander-in-chief. Well, the Tsar Nicholas, said, in this war against my first cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II, I'm going to go ahead and be the commander-in-chief. And so in 1915, the Tsar leaves his family in St. Petersburg, and he goes to the front lines, okay, the Eastern Front. And it's there that his wife, the Tsarina Alexandria, is left to run the country. Most of you have probably heard this story before, right? No? All right, so why is it a bad decision, you think, for the Tsar to go lead the troops? Just off of what you know. Gabe, what do you think?
Because if the Tsar dies, then the troops won't know what to do.
All right, so if the Tsar dies, the autocratic ruler of the country, autocratic meaning like the person with all the power is dead. That's one thing. Why else could it be bad? Karma.
You don't see many powerful wives in history.
You don't see many powerful wives in history. I mean, that's an astute comment as well. Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, Maria Theresa. I'm not thinking of too many more, you know? Yeah, what else though? What else could be an issue? Charlotte says it's probably going to lead to being even less popular. Also correct. Because when you claim control of a big thing like an army, when it fails, what happens to you? Yeah, your reputation is bad. Evie?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of go off of Charlotte. Because people are already upset with the government, and when like the main rulers abandon them, they're like, what's the point of having a government?
Yeah. And so Evie said, what's the point of having a government if the leader's going to leave and put his wife in power who has really no legitimate reason to rule, right? So the troops fight incredibly bad. We talked about this. We looked at casualties, over 9 million people. But the worst part was that they ignored the orders of the generals, who many of them were part of the Tsar's family and or were ignoring orders from the nobles. And this was an infantry. These are the soldiers on the front lines that were grossly unprepared to fight. Okay. So this next picture I'm going to throw up here. Take a moment to realize, just look at it for a second and analyze it. Why do you think Russia fought so poorly in World War I? Karma.
Snow slows people down.
Okay, like just the Russian terrain in general is pretty rugged. Yeah, cold at times. Elias? Nobody's shooting. They're just looking at each other, right? Okay. Yeah. So Charlotte pointed out, it looks like there are too many people for how many guns, right? Everyone see that? I got just count it for fun. I'm bored. I've done this lecture once already today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 24 to 27 people in there. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 guns. Yikes. Yeah, Evie.
Well, their trench isn't very well built at all. There's these corners and stuff. Like,
Yeah, that's what they were saying last class. Look at that trench. It's like, it'd be like the movie Braveheart, where they throw people on top of like sticks all, over and over again in the movie. Like, that's terrible. I mean, compared to the Western Front, which that was also awful too, but I mean,
theirs at least has like a ladder up.
yeah. Can you gain a sense of how bad it would be to be on the Eastern Front if you're Russian? and you didn't have a gun, and you had generals behind you that you had to listen to that you didn't respect, that were telling you if you ran away, they'd shoot you. But they're the same generals that are smoking cigarettes and eating all your food and giving you nothing. You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the czar is in charge of this. At the same time, the czarina is basically influenced and uses a personal advisor by the name of Rasputin. So I wrote on here, and I made sure, since we're doing this Zoom style and you got virtual kids out there, only 4 of which have their camera on. Thank you, those who do. This is for dramatic effect. Don't write down the next few slides. Your parents are listening in the room. This is a true story, but this is not on the AP exam, so everyone make sure that they understand that. This is Rasputin. This is also Rasputin. See this? See his eyes? Do they follow you? Are they in your soul? Are you mesmerized yet? I mean, you could be. Now, this man was a wandering mystic, essentially. He got kicked out of his village for impregnating 2 different women. He found a cult, a religious cult that said they followed Christianity, but what they did was they worshiped God by having orgies. Again, I'm not joking here. And he got, basically, when I say wandering, he was homeless and villageless, etc. And so he just went from town to town, doing whatever he wanted to do, which he was a sex addict. So that's what sex addicts do. They have sex. Okay. So Rasputin ends up in St. Petersburg, and he's at these bars, wandering around in brothels, basically prostitution houses. You guys get what those are. And he convinces members of the royal family to get a meeting with the Tsarina to basically talk to her. And she then is convinced that he has healing powers and can treat the only male son that Nicholas had, who had hemophilia, a disease where you bleed uncontrollably and you can't stop the bleeding, okay? So the Tsarina thought that this wandering mystic could heal her son. Is that going to happen, folks? Modern science says no, common sense, right? But he then, at the same time, is having sexual adventures with members of the royal family, both men and women, and going around to these brothels and talking about it. So he was a drunk. Again, STDs, very well known. He didn't wash himself or bathe. Slept on, street benches, and it became known to the czar, who was off on the front lines, and basically through the czar's advisors, that this was happening. And this got into newspapers. So a lot of these propaganda newspapers that are trying to create a revolution are jumping on this fact that the woman left to lead the country, is hanging out with this person. This makes Donald Trump look like a good person. Okay? Like, not good. Now, they invite Rasputin over to dinner. And at the beginning of the dinner, they serve him a glass of wine that has a double dose of cyanide in it. He doesn't die. They give him a second dose, double dose in his wine glass. Doesn't die. No, I'm serious. This is factual. So he wanders out of the dinner drunk, and 2 of the czar's uncles, they shoot him. They get him one time through the back, through his chest. And then he starts kind of crawling on the ground away, and they throw him into the river. They find his body a couple of days later, and he had drowned to death in the river, meaning he went into that river alive, breathing, after having had 4 times the amount of cyanide possible and gotten shot. You might wonder if this man really was some kind of like medicinal healer, like crazy. Now, I'm not doing any more research on this. There's a Netflix honestly story about this that came out during COVID last, I think like March, April last year. It's highly inappropriate. For some reason they like to use a lot of nudity in the Netflix series. Okay, but if you can get over that, you'll learn a little bit more about him, and then there's some stuff online that's interesting about him, but I'm not telling you to look at it. Okay. All right. Now, this is going to lead to what we start the revolution here. Okay. Most of you understand that revolutions don't happen. You don't just click your fingers. Remember, the French Revolution was disgusting. Took a long time. Well, it starts with 1917 in March on National Women's Day. 200 International Women's Day. 200,000 people are protesting. It's February in Russia because they were on the old Orthodox calendar that the Byzantine Empire used, but it's March everywhere else around the world. Does that make sense? The Romanovs never adopted the actual European calendar. The Bolsheviks would. The faux communists would. Now, the Bolsheviks planned this. They planted all these women in the front, just like in 1905. And the women were marching because they were losing their babies. They couldn't produce breast milk. There wasn't enough food. Factory conditions were horrible. Remember how women were asked to step up and work in factories during World War I when the men were all fighting? And so the Bolsheviks planted men with guns, and they basically took up positions in different churches and houses to create this strike to make sure that it was bloody. Soldiers were sent in to stop it, and what looked like a women's protest turned into an all-out civil war. I want you to think, and I don't even want to sugarcoat this, I want you to think like Civil War off some video game you've seen where people are running up and down the streets sniping each other out of windows. It was aggressive because this was a bunch of, dissidents, young men who were unhappy, who wanted to get rid of the soldiers' army. The soldiers' army was a bunch of men who had been privileged and had been used to getting what they wanted. And so it was ugly. And these uprisings, just like in 1905, spread all throughout Russia. So much that the Tsar abdicates. If you remember what that means, his cousin had abdicated or will abdicate a year later. But Tsar Nicholas abdicates. He gives up his throne. He says his son is no longer going to be the successor. And that's the end of the Romanov dynasty. March 1917. I believe they came to power in 1613. The Romanovs did. So they ruled Russia as absolute rulers for over 300 years. One family. That's a pretty nice run, right? That makes the Bushes look naive in the United States. They've only had 2 presidents. Okay, maybe you don't get that joke. That's all right. Over the head. We will go then to how this provisional government is set up. Does anyone know what the word provisional means? You play golf, you hit one out of bounds, you get to take a second one in case you don't find the first one. Provisional is temporary. A temporary government is set up, led by Alexander Kerensky, who was also leading the troops at this point. And this temporary government was meant to have a all-country election to see which political party would get to take over the government, what kind of government they would have. How do you think the Bolsheviks are going to jump on this? Well, common sense. It takes until October. Okay? In October of 1917, Lenin, who was exiled, who was writing these pamphlets and basically organizing this Bolshevik party from Austria, takes a train from Germany up through Sweden and Finland and down through Siberia into Moscow, where he then has him and the Bolshevik army. They circle the government building where Kerensky was holding this provisional government, and they just overthrow the government, call it coup d'etat. They tell everybody the Bolsheviks are now in power, and they are the legitimate government. And the cadre, this is the party members called the cadre, they jump in with him. And remember, Lenin brought a whole bag of gold bars from Germany to help fuel this. Okay, and the Germans did it because they thought this would get them out of the war. Russia out of the war, and remember, it was supposed to help Germany win it. Little did they know that 20, 30 years later, Russia's going to be occupying, the Soviet Union will occupy Germany for 40 years after that. So that's a mistake. I would call it ein grosses Fehler gemacht. In German, that means a big mistake made. All right, so his motto, peace, land, bread. So tell me what peace is. What's peace mean? What does peace mean? Come on, folks. Peace means get out of the war. What does land mean? Give the peasants back their land. What do you think bread means, Elias? Yeah, get the food to the people who need it. So running on this motto, the Bolsheviks gain a lot of supporters quickly in this overthrow of the government because they pushed some popular reforms. Now, immediately, all farmland was to be distributed to peasants. This would not last very long. Control of factories given to workers, that doesn't last very long. They withdraw within a year from World War I. Okay? World War I. And at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which you don't even remember the name, but it was a bad treaty for Russia. Look what they lost. Y'all see this? 1/3 of their population, 1/3 of their railroads, half their industry, 90% of their coal production, and 75% of their iron production they lose in the land that they cede to Germany at this treaty. Was Germany happy about this? Not for very long, because when their Kaiser abdicated and they quit the war, all of that land was turned into what? Do you remember? The buffer zone. These new countries that were created to put distance between the Bolsheviks and the rest of the world. All right, so and it doesn't end there. Things get even worse. So, backed by the United States and Great Britain, anybody who was loyal to the Tsar, so the nobles, the generals in the army, church members, backed an army that was called the Whites. Katie's my wife, yes. Her grandfather fought on the side of the Whites. He was a Jew. And so he wasn't accepted by the Bolsheviks, so he sided with the Whites, and he ended up fleeing after the war was over because they put to death anybody who fought against him. Now, it was an interesting civil war because the United States and Great Britain were caught and exposed by newspapers, sending uniforms, tanks, guns, various different food supplies through Siberia into Russia to help the Whites win. Remember, the U.S. was so scared of getting into another war that they wouldn't sign the Treaty of Versailles. But yet they're aiding this country at war, the Whites, to try to eliminate the Bolsheviks and their peasant army and infantry army. All right. It goes south when there is a newspaper reporter in Siberia who recognizes that these army officers for the Russian White Army are wearing uniforms that say Made in America. Okay. In fact, it got exposed. You guys have heard of General Motors before and Ford? Well, during World War I, they were making tanks, and they actually were importing tanks through Siberia, and they were made by Ford. And so Britain and the United States Congress, which this is illegal, I mean, you know that the Congress has to okay to aid a country at war. So this stopped, and the communists won. All right. I always find that tidbit to be very interesting. again, it shows you how worried. I want you to understand how worried the rest of the world was about communism spreading too. They wanted it to stop. Okay, that theme will come back again. All right, this is just for fun. Many of you know that the Tsar's family, the Romanovs, they were sent to Ekaterina, which was like as far off in the mountains, to live at this castle where they were on close watch. They had created an exit strategy where they were going to be taken to England and live out their lives as not royal family anymore. They were lined up for a picture and told to put on all of their richest garments in Ekaterina, and that was, or Ekaterinaburg, one of those. And they were so they wore all their jewels on them, and all the stuff they had stolen basically kept on them that wasn't taken from them. And there's a shooting line that comes in, and they just get shot all on the same spot. So they're assassinated, and there are no more Romanovs. Now, the rumor was that two people, they never found two bodies, Anastasia and Lexi. Okay. And so someone surfaced in 1979 in Eastern Europe, in Germany, East Germany, and said that they were Anastasia, the lost Russian princess. And then there were rumors that Anastasia lived because the bullets bounced off her diamonds and her gems. And so it wasn't until 1991 that they exposed this lady who was acting like she was actually Anastasia. And they figured out through DNA tracing that there were two bodies that were buried separately underneath a tree on the same like plantation or like, house. And they were Alexi and Anastasia's body. This lady had gone on to like learn her handwriting and had like images, studied her entire life, knew who her maid was and all this. It was really weird. She was doing like celebrity appearances and stuff. And then she got exposed. Charlotte Geller just said she could have been reincarnated. That's certainly possible. Okay, but I don't think likely. So Lenin takes over. No more Romanov. Civil War is over. And this was a question that was missed quite frequently on the test. The NEP. This is what the communists or the Bolsheviks try to do to get Russia back on its feet. Okay, it was capitalist reforms in order to promote agriculture and industrial development. What this really is Lenin knew that they could not create a socialist society until they had more food and more industry. Does that make sense to y'all? And so he realized he had to build it, and he could only do it with some kind of private enterprise, which is totally against communism. Communism is, remember this, communism is where there's no private ownership of anything. He mysteriously dies in 1924. Why do I say mysteriously? There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that Stalin had him killed because Stalin wanted to create a communist state, which he did not, and he wasn't a big fan of Lenin's wish-washy policies. Okay, what we do know then is 1924, he dies. You have another battle between Leon Trotsky, who was the army of the Red Guard and the Reds in the Civil War, versus the secretary of the political party, okay, of the top cadre, the top party, and that was Joseph Stalin. Okay, and Stalin was a very humble origin, but he was very sneaky. And so he basically had Trotsky exiled to Mexico, where then he had him, and he was there hanging out with Diego Rivera, who was a communist artist, socialist communist artist. Maybe you've seen his murals, they're really cool. But he was trying to help stage this Mexican Revolution and get the people like the PRI out of power. And Trotsky was assassinated in Mexico by secret police of Stalin's. And so Stalin takes power. And Stalin is going to try to put the finishing touches on a communist state. And so it's called collectivization. I believe this is on your quiz also. And that is You eliminate private farms. So all these peasants had gotten land opportunities in 1918. Now they're gone. And millions of peasants are killed, either starved to death or sent to basically Siberia, where they're just sent to work camps and they die because Stalin understood that he couldn't feed everybody. It's impossible. And so you've got to kill off some people. You got to move people around too. So the question on the quiz was this good for peasants? No. This sent millions of people to their death. Okay, then he ushers in what's known as 5-year plans. Okay, and this is an unbelievable upturn in the Russian economy, in industry, in electricity, and he basically made huge books put together by economic advisors trying to copy the United States and Great Britain on how they could, what they needed to do to use the amount of resources Russia had to industrialize as quickly as possible. Look at those numbers. 1,000% increase in coal, 200% increase in iron, 308% increase in electricity, an unlimited amount of workers to help them. So if your factory did not hit your quota, they used the quota system, you were shot or sent to the gulag. People did not live. The gulag is a concentration camp in northern Siberia. Many camps, sub camps, and there they were sent off to do menial tasks, fed, maybe broth with a little bit of chicken stock or something in it, and just basically starved to death. And remember, in a communist state, you got to feed everybody equally, so you can't have too many people either. So this fit in with the game plan. Okay, hard to believe. Yes. I'm gonna go quickly through this slide just so we can make sure we get time. Basically, though, police forces had to roam the countryside because people started to passively resist Stalin and the Red Guard, and so they had to go around and make sure that peasants were either doing what they were supposed to or send them off to prison camps. So once Stalin was able to kind of eliminate enough people to find some stability economically and politically, he then set his eyes on reclaiming land that Russia had lost. And so these areas of land that he was to add would be part of a new, larger political union called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, called the USSR. And this is the name for Russia throughout World War II and all the way until 1991. Although the imminent collapse was a little earlier, like the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th, 1989. Anyways, that's how long the USSR lasted. And to be a party member, you were in the Politburo. And then the Secretariat was the small group of people that put people in power. And so it became what is called an oligarchy. Remember what that word means from a long time ago, first semester? Ruled by a few people, not ruled by many. Okay, going back to the first couple of weeks in here when we learned about Athens being the first democracy, even though it really wasn't oligarchy. This was a true oligarchy. If we had 30 people in the room, 6 or 7 of you would be in the political party. You would be a cadre, a party member, and you would get promotions, and you could live in a little bit nicer apartment, and you might even be able to enjoy a bottle of wine or maybe even go get a radio in the black market and not get caught for it. But anybody else, you had no opportunity of upward mobility at all. And so you got chosen for the party. People picked you based on your intellect or your family. Typically families passed it down to their kids, right? And it became an oligarchy and not a true communist state. All right, last but not least, this will lead us up to World War II. Stalin was obsessed with his safety and his reputation. And so he had thought that there was going to be a coup d'etat behind his back by the political party. And so he sent between 10 to 20 million people in the army and then the political party to their deaths in what's known as the Great Purge, where he then put his own people that he thought were loyal into positions of power. And that's how you create a true dictatorship right there. That's a totalitarian move for sure. You get rid of the military or the people that you don't think are loyal to you, and you get rid of your party members that you think are talking against you. Does everyone understand that? 10 to 20 million people. I mean, it's estimated that Stalin was responsible for about 50 million deaths. That's a scary number, right? Those are human beings. Those are people with emotions. Okay? That's a lot of them. Remember that. You're going to be disgusted at the actions of the Nazis and the Holocaust, and disgusted at Christopher Columbus and the conquistadors. But this is within the last 100 years. This happened. Okay? So that's things we got to remember, honestly. All right. I'm going to stop here just so I can show everybody what the homework is tonight. And I'm doing everybody a favor by kind of halving it, making it half as much as it would be. Okay? So I got to figure out, I got to share, I got to move this over and I'll share it here shortly. Those of you on Zoom, just give me a small second. And, oh, it's because you're big on here. There we go. All right. For those of you in the room, if you don't, what? Why is he doing that? See that? Weird. Hey, Tyler, can you see my my Canvas page? Okay. Go to modules, please. And then you're going to page down to where it says weeks 4, 5, 6. You're going to see where it says 30.2 notes chart, Mexico and China. So tonight, I have the Mexican and Chinese Revolution basically cut up into two notes charts. Here's Mexico, and then China starts underneath that. You're going to get assigned one of two. Page numbers are on here, 736 to 748. If you already read these, great. Just fill in the graphic organizer. If you haven't read it yet, then this is your chance to do what you should have done. And then we're going to have a discussion tomorrow where you're going to have to help fill in these when we go over it as a class. And then you only have to do half the work. So I'm going to assign you 1 out of 2. Okay. Here is how the assigning is going to be done tonight. So I'm going to share one more thing. I think this is correct. And so this is period 9 right here. And then, okay, if you have a even number next to your name, you're going to be researching the Chinese Revolution. If you had an odd number, you're going to be researching the Mexican Revolution. Now I'm going to zoom in here so everybody can see this. Make sure you write down if you have Mexico, odd number, China, even number. Okay, I'm going to slowly go down here in case you can't see your name. All right. And the bell rang in here a little early, so I got to get these people out. Does anybody on Zoom have any questions? Okay, that's all you've got to do tonight, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks. Some of you all see tomorrow. Even number, Rowan, was China.